They're tail-end millennials, digital natives, and as much as screens have helped their lives, research shows they're also causing harm. Black Dog Institute research finding more than 15% of Aussie adolescents experience depressive symptoms. Even more worrying for teenage girls, their rates of depression doubling over the past 14 years.
We know that the relationship between screen use and girls' symptoms of depression is much stronger, and by the end of adolescence, young girls have a twofold risk of experiencing depression.
The biggest impact on kids' depression is sleep quality, physical activity, parental involvement and social interaction. And while increased screen time is linked to depression, researchers are trying to figure out how they affect each other.
We don't know whether young people are spending more time on screens and that's putting them at higher risk for depression, or whether they're starting to show symptoms of depression and then that leads to more screen time.
I was using it when I was at the height of my depression or my mental health issues, especially we were in COVID-19 pandemic, and I think that exacerbated the problems, and then the stresses of school and trying to cope with that.
For 17-year-old Leah, increasing screen time was her way to get through a period of prolonged stress.
Social media, I think, can have both a positive and a negative impact on your mental health. I was using it to distract my time, dissociate myself from the real world.
But as wait times balloon out for youth mental health services, teens are left to cope, literally, on their own devices.
We know that screens are not going anywhere, and what we really need to do is educate young people about how they can use screens responsibly and giving them practical coping strategies and skills so that they can deal with difficulties in their day-to-day life without having to use the internet as an escape mechanism.
So how do families manage the best and the worst that screens have to offer?
Will was 15 when his mental health issues were at their worst. He and his mum Cathy struggled to find the help they needed, and they join us now to talk about it. Will, when did you realise that screens were becoming a problem in your life?
Yeah, so I mean, screens have been a part of my life pretty much as long as I can remember. And I guess recognising that they were a problem would have actually happened at a fairly young age. Coming into the last 4 years of primary school, I had an iPad and I'd be spending, a lot of nights on there and sneaking it behind my pillow. So just from a young age, there was already impacts on my sleep. And I guess, I was watching a lot of content, just taking in a lot of information. So my brain was very active at night. So it was harder to get to sleep.
And you could feel as a kid that that wasn't a good thing? Because, a lot of kids might feel that and think, this is awesome. But you could tell at that time something wasn't right?
It was definitely awesome, as a kid, just, doing whatever you wanted on your, iPad, playing and watching video games. But, I could definitely feel the impact of just, even as an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old not having enough sleep and going to school on, 3 hours of sleep was pretty exhausting. And so I guess, doing that repetitively over, a number of years definitely took its toll. And, I playing video games. I spent a lot of time on my screens as well, just not socialising as much as a kid.
So, Cathy, what about for you as a mum? At what point did you clock that something was amiss?
Well, I'm not sure that we totally realised that Will was sneaking his iPad in the middle of the night when he was in Year 4. For me, I think it was when the mental health issues really sort of came home to roost, which was end of Year 7, beginning of Year 8. Will was getting into trouble at school. He was starting to abuse drugs, and it just wasn't something that we'd encountered in our family. So we knew something was amiss, and that's when we started seeking some help for Will.
Cathy, how do you help and how do you manage the screen time? It's so hard as a parent just to get through the day, let alone be across what your kid's doing online the whole time. What sorts of things did you then do?
Well, we did find it really hard, and I think being sort of the first generation of parents that have had to, try and manage kids and screens, it was very difficult, and arguments ensued normally when we tried to take the screen away. So it was difficult.
Well, you mentioned that you did get into doing some drugs. Does the pull of drugs compare with the pull of a screen, if you know what I mean?
So I guess they're somewhat similar, in the sense that it's kind of, something that provides some form of dopamine, or at least something get your attention off of things. But It's quite different, like, I guess, the reason sometimes for doing either of them. Like, I guess the screen can just kind of become a habitual lifestyle thing. And then drugs can be the same as well. But I would say they are kind of similar. Yeah, honestly, they are kind of similar.
And what was it that actually got the screens out of Will's hands in the end? And either of you can answer that, whoever's more qualified, I guess.
We did discuss this, and we were more so thinking that it was like less a case of, like, I guess with phones and being a teenager, like, it's pretty hard to take it off your kid unless you want to get into like some form of fight. So I think it was definitely a case of like somewhat maturing and I guess realizing the harm that like I was making myself suffer from spending so much time on a screen or giving so much priority and importance to the screen.
Cathy, no doubt there'll be many parents tonight watching this, grappling with the same issue. Is there anything that you could pass on, potentially as advice, things you did, things you wish you did?
Probably things that I wish I'd done. I wish I'd realised that Will had such a screen addiction at such an early age. I guess I wish I'd also had more knowledge about how to lock things down on the internet through the router or for whatever, you know. But I just didn't have the technical knowledge to be able to do that.
Will, this is looking back a few years now. How are you managing your screen time and your mental health now?
Nowadays, with my screen time, like I said, with the maturity aspect of things, I definitely just withdraw from my phone a lot more, and I don't feel like, I need to be checking my phone. It's completely fine for me to just, forget about it. I'll check on it when I remember to check on it, but it's not like a constant thought in my mind. And then I guess with like my mental health, it's massively important, like my schedule and getting an actual schedule where I'm sleeping in similar hours and waking up similar hours rather than kind of being all over the place has definitely been like one of the main improvements. But I think, also just kind of moving out of school, like was a big thing for me. But I know, not everyone dislikes school, so it kind of depends.
It's been so invaluable hearing your story, Will, and to Cathy. Thanks to both of you. I know it's been a tough ride, so thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
And of course, we should remind you if you need help, crisis support is available through Lifeline. The number is 13 11 14.